Hello everybody, I'm Brian Nessa from How To Automotive, and today I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of changing out the spark plugs on your Lexus GX470, so stay tuned for that. So we're going to get started by removing the top engine cover. There's two 10mm acorn nuts inside these holes here. Remove those two nuts. Power tools are not required, but they make jobs like this much quicker. So once you get the two nuts removed, you're just going to lift up and pull outwards like this and set aside. So we're going to start on the driver's side, and we need to remove this plastic cover here. It gives us a little bit more access to get to all the coils and spark plugs. So we're going to remove these clips. So on this style, there's a little tab in the center of the clip. You push downwards, and that releases the tab. A lot of times these clips have been replaced with different style clips, so you may require a panel popping tool. Now at the very back, there's going to be a couple little plastic nuts that are holding the cover on to the firewall here. They're 10mm in size. You can use a regular ratchet and socket or a little power tool like this to remove them. Once you get the nuts and clips removed, you can just lift up and set aside. Now with that cover off, you can see there's a lot more room to get into the spark plugs and coils and get into everything we need. Now we need to unplug all four of the coils on the driver's side here. To do that, you can push the coil connector inwards towards the coil and then squeeze the tab and pull off. And these tend to get stuck. Sometimes they're really difficult to get off. So what I like to do if they give me a hard time is I use a 90-degree pick like this, and I'll use the tip and I'll put it underneath the little clip right here and give it a little pry and then pull the connector off. So I do this with two hands. So one hand I'm pulling in the connector, the other hand I'm just slightly picking the clip out, and it actually seems to work better than pressing the tab and pulling them off. So go ahead and remove all four of the coil connectors on this side. Once you get all the connectors unplugged, then you can go ahead and take the 10mm bolt holding the coils down. I'm using a Milwaukee cordless ratchet here. I will link these tools that I'm using up in the description of the video. Once you get them unbolted, you can just go ahead and pull the coils straight out. And you can take these hoses here and you can flex them slightly left or right to get out of your way. Sometimes when you take the coils out, these little dust boots here will stick on the valve cover. So be on the lookout for that. You want to keep it all together. To remove the spark plugs, you're going to need a standard 5/8 spark plug socket and about an 8-inch long extension with a ratchet. I like to use these flex head style ratchets like this. And I get in here and I crack these all loose by hand. I don't use power tools to remove or at least break the spark plugs free. That jarring motion of a power tool can sometimes pull the threads out, especially on an aluminum cylinder head. So I crack them all loose by hand. And then after I'm got them loose by hand, a few threads, then you can switch over to a power tool such as a cordless ratchet and remove the spark plugs. When you get to the cylinder all the way in the back by the firewall, you may have to switch to a shorter extension to get it in there. So once you get them all cracked loose, then you can use a power tool like this Milwaukee 3/8 cordless ratchet here to remove the spark plugs. So NGKs are what came with this vehicle, and that's what we're going to put back in. I will link these up in the description of the video. These spark plugs come pre-gap from the factory. I do recommend that you inspect the spark plugs, make sure they haven't been dropped or the gap hasn't been compromised. If it does, it's not recommended to gap them, but you can check them with a proper tool. Also, if you look at the old spark plugs, there is no anti-seize or anything like that on the threads of this. I talked to the engineers at NGK, and they do not recommend any anti-seize on their spark plugs, as they say that it interferes with the grounding of the spark plug. Like I was saying, gapping the plug is not necessary or recommended. They have such fine tips on there, but you can use a tool to check the gap to make sure that it wasn't damaged in shipping or anything like that. And it's 1mm is the spec on this. If you find that the spark plug gap is off, I recommend returning it to the store and swapping it out for a new one. So my spark plug socket has a magnet in it, so when I put the spark plugs in the socket, it holds it. So I just feed it down in the tube and I start all these by hand. I don't use any power tools at all to start or run these back in. Once you run them down till they're fully seated, you can switch over to a torque wrench, and then you can torque these down to 15 foot-pounds. Also, one of the things you want to look out for is when you pull the spark plugs out, if the tubes are full of oil, then the tube seals on the valve cover is leaking, and you'll have to pull the valve covers off and replace the seals to fix that. So once you put the spark plugs in and torque them down, then you can go ahead and take your coils and put them back in and start the 10mm bolts and plug the electrical connectors back in. So I like to start them all by hand and then run them in until they're snug. The torque spec for the coils are 6 foot-pounds. So once you got all the spark plugs installed, torque down coils, you can put them all back in, torque those all down. So now you're ready to put this cover back on. So you're going to line it up with the tabs on the firewall here. And then once you got those lined up, you push them on and then just lower it down into position and then start the clips, put the clips back in. If yours had the original clips that had where you push the center in, you have to push the center back through the clip and then it'll be popping out slightly. Then you put the clip in and then push the tab down until it's flush. And I just use my thumb to push the center portion of it back out like this and then put it in. And then once you got it in, you just push it with your thumb until it's flush again. Then you can start the 2 acorn plastic nuts here on the firewall. You can just push those on. You don't have to screw them on. So now we're going to move over to the passenger side and take care of these spark plugs. We need to remove the plastic cover here. It's the same as the other one. This particular one had the clips lost or replaced with different ones, and I'm using a panel popping tool here to pull these clips off. You may find something like this in your case also. So far on this vehicle, there's been 3 different style clips, and that's not uncommon. The original clips break very easily, so if yours breaks, just recommend getting another clip that works. So this plastic cover has 3 clips, and then at the back it has the 2 of the plastic nuts, just like the other side. You're going to remove these. So now with the cover off, we're going to return our focus to the air snorkel. We need to loosen up the clamps. They're 10mm size bolts, so you can back these off. I'm using my little power tool to back these off. You can use a screwdriver. I think it's a Phillips head or a 10mm. So once you got the clamp loose at the throttle body and at the air box here, then we're going to take these vacuum lines off here. So there's a little squeeze tab. You can squeeze this with your fingers and pull this back and then pull this vacuum line off here. And once you get that one off, then there's a air vent here for the PCV system. You need a pair of pliers to squeeze the tab on this one. So you're going to squeeze the tab here and pull the clamp back and then pull the hose off. So once you get the vent hose off, then there's back here on the back of the air snorkel, there's a vacuum hose. You're going to pull that hose off. Then you can take the whole air snorkel and give it a wiggle like this and pull it off the throttle body. And before we pull it off the air box, we need to remove this wire loom holder here that's clipped to the side of the snorkel here. So you just kind of pull it upwards like this and it'll pop out. And then once you got that pulled off, now you can take the air snorkel here and wiggle it and pull it off the air box here. Now you can lift it off completely and set aside for now. Now that we got the air snorkel off, we're going to start unplugging the coil the same way we did the other side. I'm using my little pick tool to hook underneath the tab and lightly pull. So you can go ahead and disconnect all 4 coils. And if you notice, I'm working from the front of the vehicle. It's easier to get to all the spark plugs and coils from the front versus working on the side because of the air box. So once you get them unplugged, you can go ahead and remove the 10mm bolts. And if you notice, this side is actually easier to get to all the fasteners once you get the air cleaner out of the way. When you go to pull the coils out, it looks like they're going to hit the air box, but there's just enough room for them to clear. Now because of the air box, you're going to have to play with different extension sizes to be able to get the spark plug socket and extensions inside the tube like this. So you may have to switch down to a smaller one or even adapt a couple small ones together to get down in here. So once you come up with the right combination of extensions, go ahead and remove these or crack these free with your ratchet. And then once you get them cracked free, if you have enough room with your extensions, you can use the power tool to finish running them out. So the total book time on this job is about an hour and a half to do this. Using electric tools or cordless tools like I'm using here, you can shave about 3/4 of an hour off. So doing this job yourself is going to save you about $150 to $200 versus paying another shop or a dealer. So the back 2 cylinders have much more clearance to get to, so you can use a long extension and a ratchet, and you can come from the side like this to get to these 2. So once you removed all the spark plugs, you can go ahead and install the new ones, and then you can go ahead and torque these back down to 15 foot-pounds. Now with all the spark plugs installed and torqued down, now you can go ahead and start installing the coils. I like to start at the very back and start the back one first and then work my way towards the front. So I go ahead and install the coil, start the bolt, plug in the electrical connector. Once you got the coils installed and all the bolts started, you can run those down and torque those down to 6 foot-pounds. Once again, I just use a cordless ratchet to run those down and then go back over them with a torque wrench to make sure that they're torqued down to 6 foot-pounds. Now you can go ahead and put the air snorkel back on by pulling it onto the air box. Once you got it pulled on, then you can start the vacuum line here, and then the wire loom holder here, you can plug it back into the side of the air snorkel here. And then we're going to go around to the front and slip it onto the throttle body, reconnect the PCV vent hose right here and put the clamp back on, and then the vacuum line here in the front, go ahead and put that back on and put the clamp back on. So once you got the hoses back on and the hose clamps back on, now you can go ahead and tighten down the hose clamps that hold the air snorkels onto the throttle body and air box. After that, you can just give it a quick little double check, make sure everything's hooked up, and then you can go ahead and put the plastic cover on by stabbing it onto the firewall first, and then lowering it down, and then starting the 3 clips that hold it on, and then put the 2 plastic nuts on the firewall back. Before I put the top main engine cover back on, I like to go inside the vehicle and start it up. Make sure it's running on all 8 cylinders. There's nothing disconnected or misfires of any sort. Once I'm satisfied that it's running well, then I go ahead and put the top engine cover on. There's little catches here. They mount on the back here. So you'll scoop them onto the back little mounts here. So like this, so they'll hook on like this. And then you'll lower the cover down over the 2 little studs and then start the 2 10mm bolts. And then tighten them up and go for a test drive. So I will be linking up all the parts and tools that I use in this video in the description. That way, if you need to pick up any of those, you can find those there. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.